Hey guys, June here, and in this video we're going to talk about special attacks. There are absolutely tons of these, but we're only going to end up covering a few, as the vast majority either just deal plain damage or are entirely useless. We'll be skipping through those as well as any that have an affinity debuff because I already covered those in a dedicated video, which if you haven't seen it, you can access by clicking the card on screen now. Before we get started looking at individual special attacks though, it's worth noting that all of them have a complex accuracy buff. It's a pretty difficult boost to test, but based on the way that ModPie has described it to players previously, it sounds like the size of the difference between your current level in that accuracy stat, including any boosts like overloads, and the special attack's weapons tier is directly proportional to the amount of accuracy boost that you get. Ultimately, the result of this should be that any special attack, regardless of the weapons tier, should be about the same accuracy or slightly more accurate than you get with your conventional highest tier weapons. This is honestly a perfect way for them to have balanced this buff so that regardless of the player's level or their equipment tiers, special attacks are always going to be viable. Let's begin our exploration in distinctly non-alphabetical order by talking about arguably the best special attack that exists, the Zaros Godsword special Black Hole. This special costs 50% of your adrenaline and has a 1-minute cooldown, and is roughly comparable to a Sunshine or Death Swiftness-like effect for melee. An enemy standing inside this black hole area, which should be the case provided that you activate it in melee distance of your enemy, receives 25 to 50% ability damage in bleed ticks every 1.8 seconds for a total of 11 ticks throughout the duration of this effect. Because Black Hole is a non-attacking ability, we can also get an auto attack on top of it, either by stalling one extra tick while we use it, or by using an ability with our dual-wield weapons beforehand and then switching for a lossless auto attack. Just between this ability's intrinsic bleed damage and that auto attack, on average you'll deal about 500% of your ability damage. That's already an amazingly powerful special attack, about the same average damage as using Hurricane, twice. But on top of all of that, you get an additional 25% damage bonus to all of your conventional melee abilities for the duration as well. Like other damage boosts of this type, this doesn't affect damage over time abilities, but this essentially gives you a second, slightly weaker version of Berserk to work into your ability rotation. How you decide to do this will largely depend on the boss's special attacks. However, because Berserk and the Zaros Godsword special both have a duration of 20 seconds and a cooldown of 1 minute, it can be helpful to think about your rotation in 1-minute bricks subdivided into 20-second increments. When breaking the rotation down like this, both your 20-second Berserk rotation and your 20-second Zaros Godsword special rotation are going to be roughly identical, where your goal is to get out your high damaging thresholds like Assault, Hurricane, or Destroy. The remaining 20 seconds when you have neither buff active will then be dedicated to using your abilities which don't get those damage boosts like Slaughter and Blood Tendrils, and rebuilding your adrenaline to resume the cycle with a Berserk rotation at the end of the 1 minute. Obviously these are just guidelines and none of it is set in stone. One of the best ways that you could do this is to break your 20 seconds dedicated to bleeding and building down into 2 sets of 10-second increments on either side of your special attack and ultimate rotations. This gives you the opportunity to use Slaughter twice per minute instead of just once, provided that you're lucky with your Impatient procs, as well as working a little bit better alongside the cooldown on the Assault ability. These are honestly just some simple tips for working this into your rotation, but the Zaros Godsword definitely revolutionizes melee, and I highly recommend playing around with it to see what suits your ability rotation best. It's also worth noting that you retain all of this special attack's effects if you switch weapons, so this can be employed wonderfully at Corporeal Beast simply as a special attack switch before you go back to using your spear, and it's conducive to things like dual wield and two-hand switching while using melee as well. Next up we have the Decimation Bow with another very interesting and unique special attack. This ability, Locate, costs 50% of your adrenaline, and it causes most of your ranged abilities to become a 3x3 area of effect instead of a single target attack for 10 seconds. This effect gives you the ability to do unrivaled multi-target burst DPS, but with one combination of abilities in particular. This is of course Incendiary Shot, and under typical conditions this targets a single enemy, applying an effect to them which after a moment explodes and deals damage in a 3x3 area around them. When under the effect of Locate, however, even the initial application is a 3x3, meaning you can apply this effect on up to 9 enemies, and then it will subsequently explode, and each of those 9 effects has the ability to hit any enemies in a 3x3 area around it as well. Although no perfect conditions exist in-game, if you could somehow ensure that this was applied to 9 targets and each of those explosions also hit the maximum of 9 targets, you could potentially deal 1,000,000 damage with this one combination of abilities. Because of the painful adrenaline cost of this combo, it's not used as often as you might think, but it has dominated the Rise of the Six record kill strategies, as well as some limited usefulness at places like Angel of Death when doing mid lures for the minions, although under those conditions generally mechanized Chinchompas can give you comparable AoE DPS with a friendlier adrenaline cost. Next up, the Dragon Battleaxe special attack Rampage costs you 100% of your adrenaline, but increases your melee damage by 20% for a minute, reduces your hit chance and defense, and gives you some stat adjustments which are generally ignorable given that most people will be using overloads. Although this is a very adrenaline costly special attack, it does stack with other damage boosts like Berserk, and so is often employed as a means of increasing your damage for record attempts at places like God Wars Dungeon 1. Another great place to use it is if you're farming anima in Shattered Worlds, as the Feeling Pumped Mutator is going to be giving you infinite adrenaline anyway. Next up, we have a very underappreciated and underutilized special attack. On the Seren Godbow, the Crystal Rain special costs you 30% of your adrenaline and has a 30-second cooldown. This is a very complex ability that fires 5 attacks randomly in a 5x5 area, with each subsequent attack that hits your enemy dealing slightly less damage. The basic principle behind this special is that it deals more damage against larger enemies, and provided that your enemy is 5x5 or larger, you guarantee that all of the attacks will hit for an average of 500% ability damage. Again, this is exceedingly powerful, roughly equal to using Snapshot twice, and under the right conditions this is an absolutely wonderful way to end your Death Swiftness rotations against large enemies. Next up, and tickling us right in the nostalgia, we have the Granite Maul special attack Quick Smash, which costs 50% of your adrenaline. This is just a simple attack that deals anywhere from 30 to 150% of your ability damage, but what makes it special is it can be used while you're on the global cooldown. This allows it to be utilized in some very crafty strategies for record kills, like the 1-second Bandos kill done by Mocktail. Another beautiful throwback special attack weapon is the Dark Bow, with the Descent of Darkness special costing 65% adrenaline. Fundamentally, this is a pretty strong special attack on its own, but it can also be buffed with not only Death Swiftness, but Revenge as well, given that the Dark Bow is a shield bow. This gives it a very high potential max hit, and given that the Dark Bow already fires double auto attacks, the combination of the two is often used at record attempts at bosses like Legios. Our last juggernaut of nostalgia is the Korasi sword special attack Disrupt, which costs us 60% of our adrenaline. This is a very, very interesting special attack that hits up to 300% magic damage in a 3x3 area around the player. This is an extremely powerful AoE, but it's limited by the fact that it uses your magic accuracy when calculating hit chance rather than your melee accuracy. Even still, provided you're willing to go through the effort of bringing a few magic armor switches to eliminate your magic accuracy penalty, this is a very useful special attack to employ when farming anima at Shattered Worlds. Finally, the last special attack we'll talk about in this video is the Staff of Sliske special From the Shadows, which costs 50% adrenaline. This summons a wight that attacks your primary target 5 times for 20 to 100% of your ability damage each time, or on average 300% ability damage total. This is pretty underwhelming compared to the Zaros Godsword and Seren Godbow special attacks, but there is one limited situation where it's quite useful, and that's when standing in the green beam on Phase 5 of Telos. Since the beam's effect is more or less unlimited adrenaline, getting 300% average ability damage for one global cooldown is very rewarding, and on top of that, the wight is able to deal full damage to Telos when he's charging his instant kill attack, while damage from the player is severely limited during that time. Although unlikely, there have been a few occasions, at least for me, where this special attack has been the difference between successfully killing Telos before that instant kill and losing a streak. It may also be a worthwhile special in other infinite adrenaline scenarios, like when farming anima at Shattered Worlds, provided you're using magic. No doubt, I'm guessing I've probably skipped some of your favorite special attacks, and if you think there's a useful one that I might have missed, drop it in the comment section down below and I may make a sequel to this video in the future. Huge thanks to both Wumpery and Jory for their support on Patreon that helps me dedicate more of my time to these videos. Huge thanks to all of you as well for watching, and I'll see all you guys in the next video.